Hi, I'm Dulcie and I'm one of the technical leads and full stack developers here at Gravitywell. And today I wanted to talk a bit about pull requests. Now, I think this is something that comes up quite a lot, how to write a good pull request. So this is just kind of my perspective from reviewing code as a kind of technical lead on projects, or just as another reviewer, another dev, of things that I would expect to see or appreciate to see on a pull request. So hopefully this will help people to write good pull requests that are useful for the rest of the team, a good opportunity for knowledge sharing and development of other team members, and also that are helpful for efficiency of reviewing. So I think there's a few different sections that come into writing a good pull request. One is having a good description. So for me, this is questions about what the changes in the pull request do, and also quite significantly what they don't do. If there's anything that maybe is in the spec of the ticket or task that hasn't been done here, or if there's anything that's yet to come in another PR, it's good to flag that so it doesn't feel like the finished product when it's not. And then the other big thing to flag in the description is anything significant that's unusual, maybe, that's perhaps say you've had to work around a really gnarly problem and you've found an unusual way to get something working or done something a bit unconventional. It's a good point to flag that. Also, PRs are a great learning opportunity for other people. So if there's any knowledge sharing that you can do here around things you've learned during development, for instance, that's always really beneficial for the team. And also, so here at Gravitywell, we are mainly a full stack team. So most of our developers are working on front end and back end code bases most of the time. So one thing that's really useful specifically to front end PRs is screenshots of any of the UI changes that have been made, because without checking out the code, you can immediately see as a reviewer what's been done and very visually figure out whether it's kind of the right structure, what the UI is doing, whether that's what you'd expect. So that's always really helpful. Then I think there's just a load of things to think about when you're opening a PR around kind of whether it's ready for review. And for me, these are significant because these really can cut down the time that's spent reviewing and also make your life a lot easier, because they're the kinds of things that will get flagged in the review and you can just save yourself that hassle. So these are things like if you've got logs left in your code, for instance in TypeScript, a console log, just do a global search, make sure there aren't any there. Whether there's any code that's been commented out, that should be removed. Or any code that, like functions, things like that have stopped being used, that you can remove. It's always a good practice to remove things when they're not being used rather than keeping them in case they might be in the future, because chances are they won't be. So yeah. Also linting errors, checking that there aren't anything that's either an error or a warning. It's a good practice to clear them all out. Whether you've written the code with accessibility in mind, so that's things like making sure that in a front-end PI you've added alt text on images, you've added ARIA labels, you've kind of thought about the structure of the code so that it's accessible. And then there's kind of other things around kind of making sure that your images and media are compressed and stored properly. So you may be storing images and media in the code base, you may be storing them externally. So for instance, we use S3 for a lot of our media in on projects, and we find that it's a good practice to check that all of the assets aren't local in the repo to try and prevent some code bloat there. And dummy content, when you've started wiring things together that were mocked before, making sure that you've wired up everything and not left a placeholder hanging around, always a good check to do. I guess that brings us on to kind of testing and making sure that the code that you've written is both well written and well tested, because testing is one of those things that you're going to have to do, and it's better to flag those errors and potential bugs and be confident of your code before you merge than at the point that you're thinking about releasing something and then have to have a big bug fix phase. That sucks. So it's better to do it now. So obviously you want to make sure that you're testing things locally, but you don't want to just test the basic use case. If there are edge cases that could come up, you want to make sure you've tested them as well. This is like manual testing. You want to click through things on a web if it's a web project, or if it's, say, a new endpoint, you want to make sure that you've tried it with all of the available parameters, that you've tried the error cases and that the errors are being handled properly. You just want to make sure that every case you can imagine is being handled the way you want it to be. You should be trying to test in multiple browsers or multiple environments, so Firefox and Chrome, or Android and iOS, that kind of thing. You want to be looking for responsiveness, making sure that your code is responsive and works on various screen sizes, not just your default iPhone and Mac screen. You kind of think about the middle cases, those kinds of things. It's all the stuff you wouldn't necessarily think off the top of your head, but that's really useful to test. If there's automated tests, have they been run? Have you checked, do they pass? And should new ones be added? If your code is touching something that hasn't been tested before but it's complicated, you should probably think about adding more automated tests if you've got them already. Whether they're unit or end-to-end or integration tests, it's a good idea to keep them updated and keep the coverage high. Alongside a pull request, it's good to think about documentation. Have you commented things that are complicated in the code, or that would be useful for someone to, at a glance, be able to hover over and understand, that kind of thing? Is there anything significantly complex or unusual using a kind of weird method for doing something, or that is surprising or hard to understand? Maybe it's something that's very functional, that's really efficient, but not easily readable, that you can comment on and just add comments in the code and clear that up so that other people reading it can understand. And have you updated the documentation, whether it's held in the project repo, maybe as a README or a setup guide, or if you've got more external documentation, for instance, we use Notion, whether you've updated anything there that would kind of describe and explain a feature, flagging weird and wonderful things that might have come up. So yeah, I mean, that's just a few things. There's plenty more things that I'm sure people could come up with that improve a PR, but this is just a kind of a basic first pass of things that you can think about when you're opening PRs to help out your tech lead, your team, make sure that knowledge is being shared, that you're kind of protecting yourselves as a dev team against bugs, against weird things, against complexity that comes in and messes with your code, and so that it can be really kind of maintainable and easy to use for everyone. So yeah, I hope that's been useful.